followers and friends, and welcome back to the King Fox channel. My name is Matt Conager, and I'm building a Kit Fox Model 7 STI. Today's video has been sponsored by Absolutely No One, so I'd like to give a shout out to Absolutely No One and thank them for sponsoring today's video. In the previous video, I did the third coat of epoxy varnish on the horizontal stabilizer in the elevator, and in this episode I'm going to demonstrate what I vaguely brushed over previously with a terrible camera angle. I'm going to show the process in more complete detail from start to finish. I'll be cutting and installing the end caps on the elevator, and in doing so that provides a more aesthetic look and it makes it a little easier to cover the ends of those control surfaces and make them look nice. So you can use either balsa wood or the foam blocks that came with the kit. I chose to use the foam blocks because they're already paid for, I already had them, and I didn't want to work with balsa wood. There's quite a few of these foam blocks that come in the kit, so I'm assuming that I'm going to use them again later on, so I chose to use my first block sparingly and carefully measure, cut out, sand down, fit, and install them on the elevator. So in this video I'll be cutting and installing 4 of them, 2 for the left side, 2 for the right side, top and bottom, and then once that's complete I'll adhere them to the appropriate control surface and then ever so gently and as neatly as I can cover them with the epoxy to give them a little more rigidity because they are very, very soft. This is something to take note of later on, as the airplane tends to look solid to the bystander or passenger that may be more than willing to lend you a hand in moving it in or out of the hangar or garage or wherever you park it after a flight. So it's a good idea to brief them up on where they can push or pull or touch the airplane, as sometimes many of the control surfaces or anywhere look pretty inviting to and solid to the average passenger. This will save you the heartache later on of having to do repair if somebody puts their finger through the side of the fabric or crushes one of your wingtips that you labored over so completely to ensure that it looked nice for the skin covering. And if there's ever a doubt, I'll just tell them, thank you, I'll get it myself. So bear with me as we jump into the video and you can see what it is that you so eagerly stopped by to absorb. So let's get going. Test fitting the end caps for the horizontal stabilizer and applying a little bit of epoxy to the end rib and the top and bottom of the horizontal stabilizer respectively. And for the bottom piece I just buttered the piece because it was kind of difficult to look up from the bottom and get it in place. After that I smoothed it out and covered it with some cling wrap to keep it held tight while the epoxy is drying. So I'm just going to let this sit for a little bit. I know the cling wrap kind of came up as I was thinking how can I keep it compressed, but I only need to squeeze it on there without getting it all over my hands and getting it all over some gloves. It tends to be a pretty goopy mess, so I thought I'll leave it on there for probably 30 minutes to an hour. It's going to set up. I can take the saran wrap off and I'm going to end up covering all of this with more Hysol, so it'll have a hardened shell over the top of it. So I'm going to jump over and do the other side. Doing the same thing, buffing up the paint with that Scotch-Brite pad, hitting it with some denatured alcohol. And then test fitting the pieces, make sure they're top and bottom respectively. Again with the epoxy. This is a little bit better angle at the bottom section of the horizontal stabilizer, but they go in pretty easily. Not much to it. Lowering the elevator after I let the third coat of epoxy dry on the ribs. Getting the rest of that 550 cord out of the way. Pulling out the blocks, making sure they're long enough to cover the wingtip ends, measuring the widths on both ends, and then taking the block, arcing off the widths that I need, cutting out 2 blocks that'll fit that length with a hacksaw blade. They cut very easily. And then take 2 to make 4. Here I'll elevate the elevator a little bit, grab some 220 grit sandpaper, and start the process You're putting a foam block over a rounded metal tube and up against a flat wooden surface. So each rib is going to be different per aircraft depending on the person's personal layout. So this isn't something that you can just write up an instruction manual for. You just have to set it in there and fit it the best you can. And again, it's going to be covered with epoxy and fabric. So the idea is just to make a nice aesthetic rollover edge on that elevator, and again on the horizontal stabilizer. Marking them so I know which side they go on, and now I'm doing the opposite side. These things are super soft, as you can see. The video is sped up, obviously, but it probably took 2 or 3 minutes to sand those down per wingtip. The upper piece and the bottom piece, several minutes per. And then as you get down to the ends, they get very narrow. And on the other side, you're going to see that I actually broke a piece off. About here is where I break it. There. And I wasn't too worried about it because, again, I'm going to epoxy it in there. I wasn't happy about it, but it's going to be covered up. So I just kept the piece and I'll place it right back in there. I think this was easier to do with the foam block than it would have been with balsa wood. I'm not sure you're going to get any more rigidity out of balsa wood either, because balsa wood's pretty soft, and these pieces tend to be really small. So unless you hit that section of the tail on something, you're not going to have an issue. Marking them off. Cleaning up the shop a little bit because I was getting ready for the epoxy. There's a lot of dust after sanding those blocks, so I just wanted to clean that stuff up so the dust it tends to suck up naturally into the glue. I'll be using a small piece of Scotch-Brite pad, and I'm just scuffing up the edge of the elevator, get the paint scuffed up a little bit so the epoxy will adhere to that. I'm going to do the top and the bottom on both ends. Then I'll come back in with some denatured alcohol and wipe those down. Then I'm going to whip up a batch of epoxy. 2 parts, measure it out. I usually measure per grams because it's a small quantity and it's easy to measure that way. And then I grabbed some saran wrap to fold over the ends of the caps after I get them epoxied on to squeeze them tight. I'm just putting a little bit of epoxy on the actual rib itself and a little bit on the elevator, and then sticking the piece in there. Little saran wrap, hold it around tight, and then I'm going to let them dry for probably 20-30 minutes, and then I'll take the saran wrap off. did actually put the horizontal stabilizer on the airplane, and I wouldn't recommend doing that before you get these wingtips covered with their epoxy, because it's obviously easier when you can just flip it over and work right in front of your face. Here I had to basically sit down on a chair and do that top piece, and then contort myself into a strange position to do the bottom edge. I did try to wipe off any excess, and it does look like it goes on pretty nice, but this stuff is quite messy. I think a little bit of sanding later on is maybe going to be required to get some of the edges knocked down for the fabric. A little better angle. I didn't mix any flocks in with this because it was probably about 65 degrees in the garage and it wasn't really runny like it was in the summertime. The flocks just adds a little more consistency to it to keep it from running. Thanks for sticking with me as we roll through the wingtip coverings and the block making and the insertion. So I'll give you a quick overview as we wrap this one up. Stuff isn't the easiest to work with, and it's quite sticky, so you can wear gloves, but as you know, gloves aren't the easiest thing to work with. Put the blocks in, I'll let them sit up for probably another 30 to 45 minutes, and then I'll pull the tape off for the cling wrap, and then let them dry overnight. Alright everybody, thanks for stopping by and watching. I hope you liked what you saw. Previous set of videos I had were set up for children's audience, so no one was able to leave a comment. That's something a friend of mine alerted me to, so I've changed that. So please leave some comments, other ideas for future videos, something maybe I skipped over and you'd like to see again or in more detail. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, the subscribe button, and the little bell for notifications for more future content. Thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.